right, looks like we are live. Welcome everybody to Standing for Truth. My name is Donny and I am your host and moderator for tonight's debate on evolution. It is a privilege to have Dr. Kent Hovind and Kennedy here with me to debate the question. The important question is all life related through common ancestry. This is the great ancestry debate. Now, I got to say, it's always great to have new faces here for these debates. And so, Kennedy, I want to thank you for doing this and for giving us your time for this debate in what is a continuation of our 2022 Evolution Debate Challenge series. So what I like to do here on Standing for Truth, gentlemen, is kind of break the ice, get to know the guests a little bit before we get into the opening statements. And so, Kennedy, since it is your first time here on the program, why don't we start with you? How you doing tonight? A little bit about yourself. And Kennedy, go ahead.
Hi there. Yep. So my name's Kennedy. I'm here and ready to debate Kent on the idea that we are all connected through common ancestry. And who I am, I come without revealing too much from a perspective and bachelor's in healthcare administration and natural science with a focus on cybersecurity. So I have understood the biological foundations within a lot of experience in public resources and political connections to some of these ideas as well, and sociological and anthropological research. So without revealing too much, though, that's going to be the focus on my debate. And I'm really happy and appreciative to be here and to be debating Kent and talking to you all.
Okay, Kennedy, I appreciate that intro. I do have your relevant links and also your brief bio in the description box for people to check out. So, Dr. Kent, the science gent, how are you? Good to have you back. And a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Dell. I love it.
Yeah, it's good to be here. The topic is life related to common ancestry? Answer is no, so we can go home. No, we'll talk about that.
Sorry, guys, debate's over.
Of a common designer. My name's Kent Hovind, raised in the Midwest, East Peoria, Illinois, and I've been a Baptist preacher 48 years, taught high school science and math in Christian schools for 15 years, and I've done 300 and, what's this debate number? Kennedy, you are at number 313, okay? I want to know the truth. If I'm wrong, I'll change, I promise you. I really believe there is no evidence of any animal ever changing into anything else. Babies, cows produce cows, no exception. So we have a dinosaur adventureland here in Lenox, Alabama, science center, museum, theme park, all kinds of fun stuff. We're straight north of Pensacola, 70 miles, and it's not supposed to get cold here, but it's getting cold. So come on down, see our place. It's free. Come down for Christmas dinner. And this Sunday, we have church here every Sunday morning, at church here every night, weeknight at 7 o'clock, do a YouTube. And we just want to strengthen people's faith in the Bible, in the Word of God. Come see our science center. We got all kinds of fun stuff to do, and we're open for free. Support us if you want. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Kent, appreciate that introduction. I've also got all of Kent's relevant links in the description box as well for people to check out. That would include a link to all of the debates we've done this year in terms of the Evolution on Trial series, as well as Kent's channels, Dinosaur Adventureland and Ken Hovind Official. Okay, so with that, real quick, I'm going to go over the format for tonight. And as we've been doing with the evolution debate specifically, it is going to be a little more informal. We'll have, let's say, between 10 and 12 minutes for Kennedy and Kent to kind of lay out their arguments and set the foundation for what we're going to discuss. We'll have Kennedy start, since, again, the question is all life related through common ancestry? Kennedy would say yes. Kent would say no. And so, Kennedy, let's give you the floor for, let's say, 10 to 12 minutes. We'll give Kent the same amount of time, and then we would just jump into a free-flowing discussion, focusing on one point or one topic at a time. So with that, Kennedy, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. So again, my name is Kennedy, and I want to thank Donny and Kent for providing me with this opportunity to have these scheduled debates and with this community. So arguing for the affirmative here, that life is connected through common ancestry. Through this discussion, I will briefly touch on some of the biological and genetic theories that justify the theory of evolution through common descent, the scientific evidence presented through the hundreds of debates that have taken place on this platform have not substantially impacted these communities to turn away from young earth creationism or certain aspects of religiosity that I think become politically harmful and social. So for this first debate, I'll be orating and not using a PowerPoint to gauge the perceptions of my arguments and to see what gets focused on in the open discussion. In my hopes to be more persuasive, I intend to focus on the anthropological, sociological, and political economic research to justify my arguments and hopefully provide a map for what I think is more meaningful to see the world connected through a process without intelligent design. So it's widely accepted that all living things are connected through structures like DNA and RNA. We've developed processes like radiometric dating and isotopic analysis to measure the time and lengths of things we encounter. But the current fact is that anthropological and sociological research has a different idea of it. Ooh, and my phone just closed. This thing didn't just crash, did it?
No, you're good, Kennedy. I can still hear you and see you.
Oh, sorry, my document just closed. Ooh.
No worries. I can pause your timer.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Until you get that document back up. And so as you're doing that real quick, I will let the audience know. As always, we are doing, real quick, we're going to be doing an audience Q&A, guys. So as the debaters are discussing the topic after the openings, make sure you're tagging me either at Donny, at Standing for Truth, and I'll do my best to save your questions. Kennedy, one recommendation, I have put your volume up a little bit, but just to make sure everybody can hear your arguments clearly and concisely.
Okay. Can you hear me a little bit now?
Yes. Yeah, that sounds good.
All right now. Okay. So from where I was, it is from my perspective that a huge point of contention in religious fundamentalism is that to consider the fact that there are millions of people right now that consider and believe that common ancestry, Big Bang cosmology, and even anthropological theories that I will detail specifically through self-human domestication and other anthropological theories, while still believing in a God, there exists no force that I am aware of that stops communities from allowing their religions to become more malleable to new evidence, while still having the cultural and important attachments to history in those stories, and then make them true politically. To me, this is admirable and will be used as sort of a personal foundation of my pushback. So as someone who cares about persuasion more than debate, I do find it fascinating that scientific evidence presented throughout the hundreds of debates have not, made that push yet. But it's still important to me that as someone who has never believed in a deity, like I remember being 7 years old and thinking actively and arguing against that any God made in the image of humans in this vast apparent universe seemed illogical, but also political. So from my eyes, believing in a designer took away from the beauty of the world, not added to it. As a Black person in America, like the hard road from the historical reasons of why and how people of color became not just Christian or Muslim, but all of it, while feeling that believers obfuscated different tenets of their respective religions and comfort levels, was a road for me to change. This was wrong for me to think. It was wrong for me to think that this is absolutist. I'm grateful that in the pursuit of knowledge and science from what I was credentialed in, that I also was able to learn deeply from people who believed in God and also the same scientific theories, and more importantly, shared the same political values as me and could push me into understanding religiosity even further. And I can say that knowing because I've also experienced interacting with non-believers or atheists who share the same political desires as what I see as Christian fundamentalists, just with a different epistemology and ontology. I was told by some of them that, human beings are naturally brutish and tribal and needed elite structures to keep them in line. And that to me felt no different than us being sinners in my eyes. Meaning, even with a different understanding of reality and methods for determining what is true, you still had people from different aspects of that spectrum leading to the same political policies. So I feel grateful from my experience in Christian institutions, that I have a deeper understanding of sociology of religion from the research that I've read and experienced. And what I'll be pushing Ken in the audience listening to contend with is the fact that if religious identity without an attachment for the anthropomorphic God or prophet having done supernatural things, or tenets that say a person's behavior or identity deserves enforcement ultimately from the state, means that I may disagree with someone on the origins of the universe or morality, but if we have the same fundamental origins of our species and our place in the solar system, we have a deeper place that we can work on. And is that, in my lesson, what I had to grapple with as someone who never believed in any deity for my existence, not a more beneficial society to work on, knowing that I have more in common and more to work on and more to see in the future that I won't even get to live in, with people who clearly believe in a God but share these values with me. And there are people who don't believe in a God that have no desire for what I want. So from my perspective, I like the idea that just science itself is a goal that eventually has no morality attached. It's eventually to lead to need no more science. The possibility of discovering all there is feels impossible itself, but I think there's beauty in that wrestling. Like, I love the idea of the origin of life as complex stardust. The idea of life's experience in the universe is sort of the universe understanding and experiencing itself. The evidence shows that life evolved from single-celled organisms that branched out into trees of life that we see today, and some that are lost to us by environment and time. This process took billions of years, and widely accepted processes point to all living things on Earth being connected to structures like DNA or RNA with no designer needing to be there. We've developed processes like radioelectric dating and isotopic analysis to measure the time and length of things we encounter. And these processes are continuing to get better by people who believe and don't believe. Common ancestry is supported heavily by the research to what I like to focus more on in anthropology and archaeology, which even still continues with the idea of the exact origin of humanity or the tree of life. And I find it empowering that the idea of the story of us continues to be challenged by research that evidently makes the story more clear. So I'm prepared to respond to the best of my ability, the connection between humans and bananas and mushrooms and anything else that lives on this planet. But in my opening, I want to make it clear that I'm layering specifically the sociological connections between these ideas in the first place. Because taking apart old research and layering the vulnerability helps create new stories about who we are and understanding who we could be. One example that I love in sociology that's happening in anthropology is like the idea of what happened to the hominids that existed before us, and Neanderthals and Davitians, that story, and what we've accepted and what's changing. We've been told the story that we murdered them in a war against all. Like, that's our conventional belief. Humans' first genocides were against these lesser humans. However, like, the genetic and like archaeological research overwhelmingly suggests that we like mated those humans out of existence. So if the climate and resources diminished and we later adapted to a farming lifestyle as a result of just having to still live, scarcity and the incentives that accrued from what we understand as our story might be a little different. And that points to what I love is called the self-domestication theory. Like, this theory suggests that clear genetic, sociological, and morphological markers indicate that human beings self-domesticated traits out, like aggression and violence, to become who we are today. Survival of the friendliest, as it's been called, which I love. And what that means for like you, me, and everyone is that if we believe new stories, we can create self-fulfilling prophecies. If we believe that it's more natural to trust people, we actually can change our institutions more easily to be more trusting of individuals and communities. And anthropological research actually reveals a more egalitarian human social experience prior to settled agriculture, right? Before 12,000 years ago, up until this period of technology where we're fighting over what immense to like technical problems. Food is wasted. It's not a scarcity anymore. Most of human history didn't involve the hierarchies that we have today. So individuals didn't wield the power of kings, aristocrats, presidents, and CEOs. If we're talking about a span, if you believe that human beings have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. It appears that those power struggles and skirmishes didn't exist until very recently. And so our views life of what we can do socially, publicly, financially, for goodness, can become heavily subjective. Yes. And the tendency to other has allowed like states and institutions to absolve themselves ultimately of the social responsibilities of ultimately what we have to make, which are legal and moral foundations together in my eyes. And the manufactured scarcity, as we've like gotten over some of the stuff in our world, like me, you, everyone watching this right now, who's lived in a world of a different time, we now know that the xenophobia, the divisions are more of a political choice. And what I love as a quote is that war does not go forwards, or war does not forever backwards in time. It has a beginning. And if we have a war against all that through cave art, right? What I want to layer before we go into anything is cave art should depict some war against all somewhere, right? Hundreds of thousands of years, if you accept that as a truth, should show somewhere humans hurting each other. And there's none. No cave art depicting human beings hurting each other. And then human beings and the violence starts up directly related to this period of scarcity, which I think is more important to the story of what you're trying to look for and everyone's trying to look for in the truth that I'm here to share. I have more later.
Okay, Kennedy, thank you so much for that. Between 11 and 12 minutes of opening statement. And now we're going to hand it over to Kent. Kent, whenever you're ready, we'll give you equal time, let's say between 11 and 12 minutes, and then we'll just jump into a free-flowing discussion. So, Kent, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that, Kennedy. You are correct that this theory of evolution and our origins has a profound effect on how humans treat each other. I do a video series on this. I've done it for many years, the Creation Seminar Series, $50 for 18 hours. Video number 5 talks about the dangers of the evolution theory, and it covers exactly that topic. This theory that man is nothing but an evolved ape or animal, and there's no God to answer to, that was the foundation philosophy behind Adolf Hitler. He said, well, hey, if evolution is true, let's kill off the inferior species and speed up the process. That's the philosophy behind thousands of evil things that have happened. When they came and arrested me, they specifically said, get every DVD number 5 you can find. That's the one they wanted because it ties into how governments are involved in that. And that you are right that evolution philosophy is foundational to social and political issues. Okay? If you think you're just an animal, I've asked atheists all the time this simple question: if evolution is true, how do you tell right from wrong? You said it would be nice, if we don't hurt each other. Well, what if somebody doesn't believe that? What if your neighbor decides to come over and break your legs? Would that be wrong? Why would it be wrong? Where is your standard? How on earth do you measure things? Where's the standard for right and wrong? I don't see one in evolution theory at all. See, this word evolution is pretty slippery. Getting life started is only one hurdle. First of all, you have to have what's called cosmic evolution. The origin of life comes much later. You'd have to have time, space, and matter come into existence. They seem to want to skip that because there is no logical scientific answer for that. Where did time come from? Where did matter come from? Where did energy? Where did the laws come from? Why do you have a law of gravity, centrifugal force, inertia? Who made these laws? Then you have to have the origin of all the elements. If the Big Bang Theory were true, it would produce only hydrogen, maybe some helium, and a tiny bit of lithium. Okay, well, how do you get gold, silver, platinum, and iron from? You can't fuse past iron. So you have to have, they don't have a theory. They don't have even a good theory, let alone a scientific answer for where all the higher elements came from. So they skip that part. Well, excuse me, then you don't have a solid theory, okay? Then you have to have the origin of stars and planets. Nobody's ever seen a star or planet form, but this is part of evolution. It's called planetary evolution or stellar evolution. You can Google stellar evolution. Then you have to have life get started somehow without a designer. Obviously, somebody designed this ink pen. A simple ink pen had to have a design. The cap to the pen had a designer, okay? So there has to be a designer to complex things, and the human body is so complex. Any animal is more complex than the space. One cell is more complex than the space shuttle. Then you have to have macroevolution, changing from one kind of animal into another. The atheists always just put these family trees up and draw lines between them and see we got a line there. That's not science. That's a line on paper. That's artwork. That's all they've got. Then you have to have what's called microevolution, variations within the kind. That one has been seen and happens all the time. And every farmer in the world counts on it happening, but there's limits. He might want cows that can handle hotter climate. So he selects the ones with hotter climate capabilities and breeds them and slowly sells off the rest. And pretty soon he's got a herd of cows that'll handle hot climate or give more milk or give more beef or, I don't know. There's all kinds of selection, but it's still a cow. See, Professor Dave, calls himself Professor Dave, believes in evolution, but he would not discuss those first 5 steps. Nobody's ever seen this. All they ever give in the debates, and Donny, you can testify this, they give examples of number 6, variations within the kind. And God said they would bring forth after their kind. So that's all that happened. This macroevolution is pure fantasy. It's fairy tale stuff. God said they'll bring forth after their kind. How many times in there? 10 times. I think 24 times in the first 7 chapters of the Bible. Said they'll bring forth after their kind. How many kinds of cows? Let's see, there are now, I think, 400 breeds of cows. I bet they had a common ancestor called a cow. Let's see, 300 and some breeds of dogs. Might have had a common ancestor called a dog, okay? How many kinds of bananas? 1,000 types of bananas. They might have had a common ancestor called a banana. But that does not mean a banana is related to Bill Clinton. Well, that might be a bad example. Okay, let's see. How many kinds of eagles? Well, I think there are 60 kinds of eagles. How many kinds of oak trees? 600 species of oak trees. They might have come from an oak tree. But see, you were taught, apparently, Kennedy, that this evidence of this variation within the oak trees and other creatures proves that everything's related. No, it does not. God said they bring forth after their kind. That's all we've ever seen. That would be science. There are 8 different species of bears. Might have had a common ancestor. They say, well, macroevolution is just micro with longer periods of time. No, it's not. Variations within the kind is all we've ever seen. This guy said, microevolution can be extrapolated to explain the phenomena of macro. The answer is no, cannot, okay? Evolution is defined in a change in species over time. Well, then, it's still the same kind. Don't use the word species. That confuses things. We'll skip all this, but you mentioned something I wanted to get to interesting here. Let's see. All we've ever seen is variations within the same kind, which everybody agrees happens, okay? Every farmer tries to make that happen. Then they talk about finding transitional fossils. You mentioned fossils. Kennedy, no fossil could count as evidence for evolution. All you know is, from any fossil you find, and I've got thousands of them here in our museum, all you really could prove is it died. You could not prove it had any children that lived. You couldn't prove it had any children that lived that were different. No animal today produces children that are different. Cows produce cows, cats produce cats. No fossil could count as being transitional. You couldn't prove it had any kids, and you could never prove it had kids that were different from itself. No animal today can do this. Why can a bone in the dirt do something no animal today can do? There's plenty of animals today having babies. Let's see it happen again. I want to watch it this time. There's some animals have a very short lifetime, a quick turnaround time. There are some bacteria get born, grow up, and get married in 8 hours. You get 3 generations in 1 day. So one scientist in 30 or 40 years in the laboratory could watch probably millions of generations. And they've done that with different single-celled creatures that have a short generation time. They never change to anything else. You get variations. You might get a bacteria that's resistant to certain drugs. It's still a bacteria. Evolution doesn't happen. No animal today can produce kids other than its same kind. Why should we believe fossil in the dirt can do that? You apparently were taught this, and you apparently believed it without checking it out. You got brainwashed, Kennedy. You didn't get educated. You got brainwashed. But you are correct. This theory has a lot of effect on politics and sociology. Tremendous effect, okay? Transitional fossils help bridge the gaps. There are no transitional fossils. Nobody's ever seen any. Nobody sees any animal produce anything other than its kind. There are hundreds, perhaps thousands of transitional fossils. Well, I'd like to see one. This is what you call baloney. There are no such thing as a transitional fossil. 375 million years ago, an intermediate fossil. Oh, really? Tiktaalik? You think that fish that had short limbs and then the fin is evidence? A Tiktaalik doesn't count as transitional. You couldn't prove it had any kids that lived. You could never prove it had kids different than itself. No animal today can do it. When you find Tiktaalik, all you know is there was a fish that had short legs and then a fin. There's still some of those alive today. So what? That's not transitional. So they go through the schools and teach the kids, oh, there's evidence Look at this, Archaeopteryx. We cover that thoroughly on seminar 4. But they make these family trees and say humans are related to birds. Okay, well, Kennedy, do birds fight over things and kill each other over food, over territory? Is it okay? Is it okay if the biggest crow kills the smallest crow to get his food? They do. What would be wrong with that? What's wrong with the strongest person in your block killing everybody on the block and taking over all your food and cars and houses? Why would that be wrong? You are exactly correct that evolution has a profound effect on sociology, and it's an evil effect. It's not good. It's evil, okay? Where's the standard? See, Christians at least have a standard. Thus saith the Lord, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill. I mean, he gave us some rules. Where's the rules in evolution? In evolution, the strongest survive. Charlie Darwin's book, up here somewhere, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the favored races he talks about. Struggle for life. Struggle for life. The favored races? You mean the inferior races should be executed or killed off? Oh yeah, that's what Charlie meant. That's what they did too. Do you think you're related to a dinosaur or a ladybug? I asked Professor Dave, you related to a ladybug? He said, well, yeah. Well, he may be, but I'm not, okay? A pine tree. Kennedy, and evolution's a religion. I will continually call it a religion. In your religion, you believe in evolution. You've never seen it. Do you believe you're related to a pine tree or a worm? Going back to a common ancestor. All the many forms of life on earth today are descended from a common ancestor. Do you believe you have a common ancestor with a worm or a pine tree? I can answer for you from what you said earlier. Yes, you believe that. I'm saying that's not science. You make these family trees and show the humans related to the seaweed. There we go. Here we have humans, sharks, seaweed, and starfish, and octopus, all related. This is propaganda. This is not science. My argument in this whole series of debates for the last year, Donnie said, I think we've done 50 now in the last year, and I'll do 5,000 more. There is no evidence for any change from one kind of animal to another. None. Nobody ever sees a sponge produce a non-sponge or a starfish produce a non-starfish. Why do they have the starfish with a line going to the insects? They have insects going with a line connected ultimately back to where humans go. Do you think you're related to insects and reptiles and birds? Is it wrong for the biggest bird to kill the other and to steal their food? It happens all the time. Should the birds get together and have a sociology class and teach them, boys, that's bad, boys and girls? It's not going to happen. So I think that this evolution theory is the most dangerous religion in the history of humanity. And I call it so in my video number 5, the one they put me in jail for. The dangers of evolution. This is the foundation for communism, socialism, Nazism, Marxism. It all goes back to evolution theory. Is there a God or not? There's only 2 options. There is a God or there isn't. No, nobody's thought of a third option. If there's a God, he makes the rules. He tells us what's right from wrong. It's real simple. Okay, thank you so much. Go ahead.
Okay, Ken, thank you so much for that roughly 12-minute opening statement. Now that we've both had opening statements and we've laid out several points and arguments, let's now jump into more of a free-flowing discussion. And since Kent just ended with his, Kennedy, why don't we allow you to kind of pick the first point and the first topic for discussion. As moderator, I'll make sure that we're moving along smoothly and making sure that we're not spending, too much time on one topic, and that way we can be comprehensive. So with that, Kennedy, feel free to pick the first topic, and gentlemen, let the discussion begin. And Kennedy, just make sure to unmute yourself, actually. Sorry.
Absolutely. So let me know how you want to go about this, because I'm someone who can talk, so I don't want to cut you off. I don't want you to cut me off. And I'm here to learn. Hopefully you're here to learn. So if you want, let me know if it's cool if I go for maybe 3-4 minutes, and then Donnie, you could cut me off. And then any response that you have to that, I'm going to shut up and listen to you and have your response to it. Does that sound cool for a little bit? Is that our back and forth?
So if you wanted to do, let's say, a 3 to 4 minute response right now, and then we'll give Kent 3 to 4 minutes. Let's try and do that maybe once or twice. But
you can feel free to cut me off too, if you would.
Okay. Okay, so I guess as long as we're still focusing on one point or one topic, but we do want to keep it as free-flowing as possible, where you guys can ask each other questions and kind of bounce off each other, right? But Kennedy, that's completely fine. However you want to start off this next portion, go ahead. And if I have to cut you off, I will. The floor is yours.
Alrighty. I've heard it's wonderful for me to be a part of the responses that I've heard from so many debates. Like, so to start off, I have to say, like, that among anything, like, we can at least establish, like, there's no religion attached to scientific theory, right? Because you're not a flat earther. And if you're not a flat earther and you believe in the same scientific principles that I do, to say that, like, flat earth is silly, there's a foundation of reality that you and I are existing upon. And so your topology has to somehow have Christianity and your beliefs of young earth creationism also attached to mine that have none of that, but say that the earth is round, right? So, like, when we talk about what reality is and where a God is present or not present, like, we have to sort of establish realities. Like, because what I said in my opening statement, and where I want to maybe, I have a lot to say, but I do want to, like, get to where your idea of God is, because from my perspective, God is both this personhood, this anthropomorphic, made in the image of you and me, something that we would recognize as a personhood, even if he's not, interacting with us, and has moral foundations and rules that we should abide by in society, and has sent prophets to initiate that. But if that is different than a force God, meaning a God that is what I talked about, people who believe in God as a particle, God is the dark matter, God is dark energy, and what some people just philosophically call as God is the gaps. If that is what people culturally attach their Christianity, Muslim, like anything to, and still believe in the same political and scientific principles that I do, then we have to meet on some sort of reality here, because those people believe in God and believe in the same thing as I do. And then you also believe in God, but don't believe in the same principles. So there's a spectrum here that we have to meet upon that I think is so interestingly crucial to this debate, because as someone from my education, I grew up going to Catholic Jesuit education. And again, I grew up Christian. I've never believed in a deity. And from my experience and what I tried to relay vulnerably, I understand and feel that. Like, to have and get intrinsic motivation from somewhere else is hard. So I'm curious, from your perspective, like, is there not, like, a way you can see this argument about evolution without a God, or is the belief system inherently it has some God attached to it? Because if so, please tell me who that God is so I can understand it.
Go ahead, Kat.
Okay, well, thank you, sir. Quite a few topics there. First of all, I do believe the Earth is round and it spins and it goes around the sun. Tomorrow afternoon, 3:45, we go through winter solstice. That's the shortest day of the year when the Earth is tilted as far away from the sun. I taught Earth science for 15 years. I can take a quiz on that topic with anybody you know, and I think I'll do pretty well. So yes, the Earth is round and it spins, and I think the flat Earth idea is dumb. Now, Kansas is flat, but the rest of it is round. Okay. Now, so we can take it off the table. No. There is definitely a religion attached to evolution. It's a religious belief. It's something you have to believe in. Nobody ever sees a dog produce a non-dog. But you have these family trees showing all these animals going back to a common ancestor. And the dogs are related to the buzzards. And evolution is a religion. This is my point. You don't see any of this. They claim it. They draw pictures and draw lines between them. That's not science. I could put a picture of me and a Sherman tank and draw a line between them. Does that mean we're related? No. See, all this has been a giant propaganda campaign for the last 150 years. Does it? And we're not here to discuss, is there a God? I think there is, but I don't have to prove that. See, I'm not asking for my religion to be taught in public schools at taxpayer expense. You guys think the religion of evolution should be taught and everybody should pay for it. Everybody's required to pay for one religion to be in the school system. These family trees are in all the textbooks. Who paid for that textbook? Who pays that teacher's salary? Who pays the building? Who pays for the utilities for that building? Who buses the kids to that class, to that building? The whole public education system, and I'm not against it, I'm just saying they should not get into origins at all. It doesn't matter. It's unrelated to science. What we know is cows produce cows. That we know. And so the kids can study how this happens. And boys and girls, if you live in a farm that's, you need short-legged cows to get under the bushes, well, then you start crossbreeding your short-legged cows. But they should be taught there are limits. It's going to always remain a cow. They've tried for a long time to get smaller and smaller dogs. They now have the teacup Chihuahua. Wouldn't last 10 minutes out in the woods. They have to babysit the dumb thing. Most of the varieties of dogs that man has created, they're still dog, first of all, and they wouldn't make it on their own. Nature would select all the pugs to die. My wife has a pug. Actually paid money for it. Still can't believe that. So, I'm just pointing out that, yes, variations certainly happen. They're still the same kind. Even when man tries to turn it to something else, he can't. You can try and try and try to turn your dog into anything, a non-dog. I promise you it won't work. And there's going to be a limit. I think the Great Dane is probably close to the limit and how big they can get. Well, why don't they keep breeding dogs till they get one as big as an elephant? There are animals as big as an elephant, like an elephant. It just won't happen. There's a limit. And this is what the atheists do not understand. What you shared tonight at the beginning was a clear example of your belief in evolution. Once you believe in it, well, then you can get all kinds of political theories from it. Stop. You got the wrong foundation. The earth is round, established reality, dogs produce dogs. Who is God? I think the only logical solution, if I said this ink pen had no designer, everybody would say I'm insane. I have no idea who made it, and I don't care. But I know somebody made it. A screw, a nail has a designer. You want to compare that to a cell in your body? One cell in your body, Kennedy, is more complex than the space shuttle. You really think it happened by chance with no designer? You're welcome to believe that, and you obviously you do. But don't call it science. You should admit that you have a religious belief in evolution. You don't have any science to back up the idea that you're related to a hamster. You can believe that if you want, but it's not science. That's my whole point for this whole series. So far, Donnie, we've done 50. Nobody has shown any proof. Where's the evidence of any animal producing something other than its kind? You claim there's a common ancestry. All life's related through common ancestry, the title of the debate. Where's the evidence? They draw the lines on paper here. This way. We don't see it. We don't see this happen. It's pure imagination. These are lines on paper is all they are. I think it's criminal to teach that to children, that it's part of science. Criminal. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kennedy.
It's really helpful for me to hear your responses out loud as I've heard them throughout debates. And I want to and I have 3 or 4 minutes, Donnie, right? Okay. Feel free to cut me off and ask questions. But I want to fundamentally start off with saying that I think the belief in time is something that, as an understanding of our realities, conflicts with your Christian identity and my non-belief. And I think what I said earlier, in that there are people who are religious, who believe and say that they are Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, and believe in a God, believe in forces that I would say are sociological and gets into linguistic areas that are, from my perspective, no different, but share the same political ideas and scientific principles as me. So if they're going to the same schools, studying the same information, and still believing in those gods, and I don't and never did, but we're still doing the same work, who is either closer to the truth or making the religion? Because if they is what you're saying, that a Jewish person, a Hindu, a person who believes in animism from who knows where, are they doing scientific principles and then believing in 2 religions at the same time? Because it just, from my perspective, makes no sense, because from my perspective, it's not a religion. Religion is what you believe in, and it is very malleable. There are religions where there's no God at all, right? So if you're saying what we have is a religion with no God at all, okay, but that needs to be expanded upon, because if you're saying that evolution has a God attached to it, I'm not sure who that God is, because there are people who believe in other gods that still believe in evolution, right? There are people who believe in Hinduism that say, yeah, the reincarnation of the universe, the big bounce, that's what I believe is more likely. I mean, I can't like provide evidence for that right now. And when you said what you said earlier that I'm really interested in is that we have no evidence for how humans and cows, and I love that argument, because what it really illustrates is that we have on some fundamental level an importance of trust that we have, right? Like, because time is what you're using as a difference in our reality, you have to trust either the Bible or the evidence that we use to say this is how time works. What I mentioned, radiometric dating, isometric analysis, genetic evidence, all of this stuff. You have to accept those peer-reviewed, double-blinded research. And if you don't, okay, well then where are you? And if you're not convinced, you can have those beliefs and have your own studies, but ultimately you're absolutely right. There is a public space where we have our ideas and you have yours. I agree with you on that as well. And what I love and why I see the universe as more beautiful is that, like, it's important to me to see that, like, we are connected through the overwhelming evidence, like that human beings and the life that we're connected with is beautiful. Like, from my perspective, the idea that an alien species comes down here and sees us. Yes, us and the bananas and the mushrooms and the phylogenetic tree of that, it's going to be totally unique and separate from whatever they come from. And that is cool. And I think there's no way that we've designed space art to illustrate that when we get to that point, it is going to be cool if this stuff was clearly more true while people still believe in God writing these stories. Star Trek was not written by atheists fully. Neither was Star Wars. Neither was any other scientific fiction thing that has influenced everyone watching this and the real things that we've done. It's been an amalgamation of all of us. So I just don't understand why religion, in the way that you prescribe it, can't be malleable in letting the supernatural and scientific evidence that clearly is not true fall to the wayside, and some of the ideas of what you want in society become more prevalent. And from my perspective, the only reason that does not seem to be something people are willing to do is because it's not accepted. And what I want to ask to you before you go is, like, why do you think, because I have a detailed response as to why, but why do you think young earth creationism isn't taught in schools? Because it was. And it was way more prevalent. Like, me even having this conversation was a problem, especially with how I look. So why is that no longer okay if it should be the accepted way everyone views life? You know?
Go ahead, Kat.
We got about 13 topics on the table here. I wish we could go to one at a time like we originally said. Tried to run it down as quick as I could.
Actually, Ken, if I could make a suggestion, let's do this. So let's give you now an uninterrupted response of 4 minutes. We've been going 4, 4, 4, 4. And then let's now shift, now that I think we've had plenty of uninterrupted responses. So Kent, do your 4 minutes, and then let's just keep it more towards just one topic, question, and really free-flowing. So Kent, go ahead.
Well, okay, to answer as many as I can remember that I wrote down quickly, the God of evolution is time. You believe billions of years can do what we never observe. See, science is different. I love science. Evolution is not part of science. Science, knowledge gained from using observations and experiments. Where is the observation of any cow producing a non-cow or coming from a non-cow? There are no observations of this. So if I ask you, why do you think cows came from an amoeba, you will say, over billions of years, stop right there, there's your God. In your mind, time can do it. Well, maybe it could, but it's not seen. Nobody's ever seen an amoeba produce a non-amoeba, or a dog produce a non-dog, or a bear produce a non-bear. Nobody observes it. Science is what we can observe. So your belief in evolution is outside of science. You can believe it if you want, even if it's true. It's not part of science yet. It hasn't been seen. Nobody can see this happen. The fact that there are similarities in the DNA and the RNA, does that prove a common ancestor? No. I got thousands of books in my library here. I bet all of them use the same letters of the English alphabet. What does that prove? That's the code with which you write English, those 26 letters. That's the code. There's a code that I think God used to write all the different things of life. I think bears and bananas might have some similar DNA because the same God used the same code. Microsoft PowerPoint and Microsoft Word have millions of identical lines of code. When I'm typing a document in Word, I hit spell check. It takes me to the same dictionary and when I hit spell check from PowerPoint. Wow, how did that happen? The same guys wrote the code, or they used the same code. The similar DNA structure, you've been taught, and you fell for it without searching it. You've been taught the similar DNA and RNA proves common ancestry. Stop, Kennedy. There's no way it proves such a thing. Even if it's true, that's not proof. All we know is they got similar DNA code. That code is way more complex than any library in the world, and yet you think it happened by chance over billions of years? Time is the God of evolution. And there's all kinds of ways you can prove the Earth cannot be billions of years old. I cover about 30 of those on my video number 1, The Age of the Earth. The Earth is spinning. I think we'd all agree, except for the flat earthers. The Earth is spinning. It's going 1,037.6 miles an hour at the equator. The Earth is slowing down. We know that. It's slowing down from tidal friction. It's slowing down from internal friction with the liquid core. It's slowing down from the Coriolis effect of the wind patterns. We know a lunar drag. There's known factors. It's measurable. The Earth is slowing down. It's measurable. It's observable scientifically. Also, it's intuitive. Any spinning object would slow down. Duh, it has to. Well, if you do the math on it, say, okay, if the Earth is slowing down about 1,000th of a second every day, that's why about every 3 years they have to add a second to our clock. Google leap second. Not leap year, leap second. They add a second to our clock, otherwise midnight doesn't come to midnight anymore. So the Earth is slowing down. I don't think anybody's going to argue with that. Does that put a time limit? Yeah. What is that number? I don't know, but can't be billions. If you go back in time and add 1,000th of a second to the spin of the Earth every day, at some point it's spinning really fast. And the Coriolis effect is going to throw people off, and the oceans are going to be in chaos constantly. There are lots of disastrous things that would happen if the Earth were spinning 3 or 4 or 5 times faster. You can't have billions of years. I'm sorry. I know that's the pacifier that keeps the atheists from crying. I'm sorry. I'm going to pull the pacifier out. The sun is up there burning right now, Kennedy. You can watch it. You can Google it. The sun burns 5 million tons of fuel every second. Lousy gas mileage. 5 million tons a second. Okay. Well, let's go back in time in our mind and add 5 million tons to the sun every second. How far back can we go in time before that starts to become a problem? Because the sun's mass attracts the Earth's mass and keeps us at the right distance, called the Goldilocks zone. We're just the right distance from the sun. If the sun's mass were greater, the gravity would be stronger, and we wouldn't be the perfect distance from the sun. The orbit of the Earth and the sun would swell up and be hotter and burn everything on Earth. The moon going around the Earth, the moon is slowly leaving us. 1.6 inches a year, I believe, is the agreed on number. Well, if the moon is getting farther away, then it used to be closer. That also creates a problem. See, you guys think, you believe, if you had billions of years, the amoeba could turn to the elephant and the whale and the human. You believe that. I can take away your billions of years scientifically all sorts of ways. And I do that on video number 1. I'll send it to you if you'll contact drdino.com. I'll send you one for free if you promise to watch it. So I'm saying time is your God. I'm out of time here, but I've got a bunch more things. The genetic evidence, I accept the genetic evidence. The genetic evidence shows us cows produce cows, always. And dogs produce dogs. And they got some similar lines of code. I bet the lines of code in the dog and the cow that's in their gene code to tell it to make hair. Well, that might be similar because they both make hair. They don't have the line of code that tells them how to make scales. They don't have scales. They don't need them. So yes, there are probably similar lines of code. And in your mind, that's proof of common ancestor. In my mind, that's proof common designer. The fact is, neither one of us could prove it, so don't teach kids either one. Teach them science. Kids, cows produce cows. Quit using these stupid charts connecting the cow back to a bacteria. That's not science. Okay, why isn't young earth creationism taught in public schools? Well, first of all, it is in many schools. Teachers teach it anyway. I have lots and lots of teachers that contact me and say they show my videos in their class. That'll make some of the atheists furious. They want only their religion taught. But you're right, it used to be. The fact that evolution has now taken over the school system for the last 100 years, does that prove it's true? Hitler took over Germany for a while. Did that prove that was good? Joseph Stalin took over Russia for a while. Did that make it good? Mao Zedong took over China. Pol Pot took over Cambodia. Sure, just because there's been a takeover does not mean it's true or good. There's been a takeover of our schools, that's all, and I'm trying to fix it. Go ahead.
Okay, gentlemen, let me just jump in here real quick, Kennedy, before you respond. So looking at my timer here, we've now had several rounds of equally timed responses. What I'd like to do now is, Kennedy, let's have you pick one point or one topic that's been mentioned so far, and let's kind of run with it, asking each other questions. If you feel like you need to, interrupt in a healthy manner to kind of clarify points, we can do that as well. So go ahead, Kennedy. We'll allow you to pick a point, and we'll just kind of run with it.
Okay, I gotta figure it out, because I've just heard cows like 18 times. So I've got cows on the mind, and I'm like counting them as they go across me. So apparently that's the thing we're talking about. But I want to know about time. If that's the essential thing, I do want that to be the subject. But if I can I ask you a question about time? Because I'm not going into decay, and we're not going into the math. I want to ask a question about it conceptually. That's okay.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, so do you think time and dread have anything to do with scientific observation and societal trust? Like, do you think the actual concept of time itself is intrinsically connected to observation and trust within each other? Yes or no?
I think we all are stuck in time. There have been many times I wished I could go back just 5 seconds to undo the dumb thing I just did, okay? Many times. We are stuck in a river of time. You cannot go back. I'd like to ask the evolutionists, if the universe began 13.772 billion years ago with the Big Bang, what was 13.773 billion years ago? Did time? Well, that's a fair question. Who created time? Who created space? If the Big Bang took place, what exploded? And what did it explode into? You'd have to have time and space before you have matter. If you had matter but no space, where would you put it? If you had matter and space but no time, when would you put it? So you have to have time, space, matter come into existence in that order. Well, my Bible says in the beginning, there's time. God created the heaven, there's space, and the earth, there's matter. Each of those is also a trinity. Time has past, present, future. Space has length, width, height. You can't have two-dimensional space or four-dimensional. It's all imaginary. You can't have matter as 3 dimensions, solid, liquid, gas. So time is the God of the evolutionists. Time is your God.
I understood. Time is our God. That's, what? Fine. If time is a God, what I find interesting about the linguistics of that is, if that God has no personhood, from my perspective, who cares? Right? Because if time is a God, and if I'm running this dimension of the 4-dimensional space, and the reason why I don't feel like you answered my question is because when you say that time is a God, you're not answering the question about, do you think your definition of time, meaning Earth that's 6,000 years old, do you think the definition of that time is inherently connected to the observation that we have in the societal trust that we have? Because even if you say that time is our God and that's why it's different than yours, okay, but in your definition of that, from my perspective, that God is no person. And that's why I mentioned the fact that people who believe in a God can still fall in the same perspectives as me, because and why it changed me and helped me grow and understand religiosity, but also was annoying as heck. Right? Because if your understanding of a God is just this definition that I call time, something we do not fully understand, something that we are actively working on, and something that is definitely not a person telling us who the tenets of our moral institutions and like beings should be, definitely not having a prophet that came down and did supernatural stuff, and definitely not posing the idea that human beings are special uniquely in the universe, and there's no other being out there who's as special as us uniquely, which I still think is beautiful, right? There is no species unless there's another Earth that we find out there where you, the version of you and me come out here and be like, hey, like if that ever happens, okay, we'll have a very different discussion in that world. But I don't know if that's going to happen. So until that does happen, from my perspective, it matters more right? That our definitions of time, like, meet. So if your definition of time is saying that it's 6,000 years and mine, with all the evidence, it's just the God that I have, that's not answering my question. Because you can have that definition of time and still believe in a God, and that doesn't help me, right? Because you can still believe in a God with that definition of time, and then have some of the moral, political, and then social implications of what we should be doing, regardless of believing in that. So you got to give me more than that.
Okay. I don't think I don't think anybody's ever been able to clearly define what time is. Give me a jar of it and paint it red. What exactly is time? What we know is the Earth spins around once a day, and it goes around the sun once a year, and we measure things based on that. The spin of the Earth and the circling around the Earth. But if I told you this ink pen was 10,000 years old, we could start an argument on that. You'd say, well, hold it. This is Bic Corporation. Bic wasn't made till 1946 after World War II. There was no Bic. Or 46. Oh, okay. You just proved me wrong. I said the pen's 10,000 years old, but it says Bic on it. Oh, so just by that one statement, Bic became a corporation after World War II. Oh, well, this thing had to be made after 1946, didn't it? I have no idea when it was made, but it's not 10,000. Okay? I can't prove to you the Earth is 6,000 years old, and that's not my burden of proof. I believe that's what the dates in the Bible add up to. I think everything can be explained that we see in the world with a 6,000-year-old Earth and a giant flood destroying everything. I think Grand Canyon probably formed in about a week. You don't need millions of years. You need millions of gallons. Billions of gallons of water poured through there. I cover that in my video number 6 about the rapid formation of Grand Canyon. It's not the top of the canyon's 4,000 feet higher than where the river enters. Rivers don't flow uphill. Grand Canyon was a breached dam. Okay, that's another story. But as far as time, understand what you're asking. Time is a God. And you said, how does that affect? If a person believes that we're an advanced animal, we've gone farther, that affects everything in sociology. Adolf Hitler was a very, very staunch evolutionist. Hitler thought the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Norwegians were the superior ants, with the superior group, and everybody else should be killed. Hitler hated. Hitler hated.
No.
Yes, he did. Go
ahead. Hitler. Sorry. No. I do. I'm sorry. Before we can go any further, I don't agree with those folks either. As someone who's never believed, I don't agree with anything the Soviet Union's ever done, or Germany. And just because what I said earlier, it feels like you're pushing away the fact that I said you cannot believe in a God and still do culty things that look religious, right? I said that there was no difference between people who did not believe in a God and the definition of sin that I had heard from people who still shared the same ideology. So you saying that to me means nothing, right? And even I know the historical aspects of it that makes it Hitler was a mystic and spiritual person and believed in the racial superiority through a different definition of religion. That was not atheism. And atheism itself does not present moral hierarchy. And the reason I want to get to that, because it seems like the time is not enough. It seems like what is more clear foundationally is that atheism does not provide an answer for how the world, how us being connected is beautiful and important and meaningful. And you are right about that. You're right about that. The reason why people like Carl Sagan, and why I want to ask about how you can move, is because the reason why people like Carl Sagan and even begrudgingly Neil deGrasse Tyson have moved some of the zeitgeist in the way that we conceptualize the universe. It's because in an uncaring, damning universe, it is hard. It is hard to see any meaning in that, and to see that we are connected to bananas and mushrooms is meaningful. Yeah, because we step on ants and stuff all the time. I understand the feeling from it, right? But you're not pushing me on the ideology here. You are not intrinsically. And I think when you talk about what's happening in public schools, what I bring up is the fact that why young earth creationism isn't taught in schools anymore is because you had things like Epperson in Arkansas, a landmark case that invalidated the statute of teaching human evolution in schools. You're right that you can still teach it, but you are prohibited, in the words of the majority opinion, from teaching anything that specifically says that religious sects are it says that teaching and learning must be tailored to the principles or prohibitions of any religious sect or dogma, right? And then that was challenged in 1987 again, and they said that the government, they had three things that they came up with: that the government must be legitimate and secular purpose, it must be advancing, it must have the primary effect of not advancing or inhibiting religion, right? And it must not result in excessive entanglement with government and religion. And then in 2005, finally, what came up as a landmark course, right? We firmly established that creationism and intelligent design were religious teachings and not areas of legitimate scientific research, because the Dover School, that case, right, Kiltsmer versus Dover area 2005, came up from the intelligent design movement. What did that say? The school board chose not to appeal, right? Because they firmly established creationism was a religious teaching, not in the legitimate area of scientific research. And this is under George Bush's government. So I really want to make it important to contend with the idea that the underlying reality that we have and the God of the gaps that feels like is being presented here is important for me to get
Kennedy, I'm just going to stop you there. I want to give Kent the opportunity to respond now.
Always cut me off.
No worries. And then for the final minutes, let's really try and engage the main question for tonight. Is all life related through common ancestry? And that way, I think we can ensure that we're satisfying the topic in its fullness. So Kent, go ahead, take your time to respond, and then following Kent's response, again, let's do our best to specifically engage the debate question. So go ahead, Kent, floor is yours.
Yeah, one topic at a time. You totally misunderstand what happened in all three of those court cases. The court cases were about, can the teachers be required to teach creation? The court said no. Evolution was never on trial. It should have been. You are correct. The teaching of creation has religious connotations, no question. So does evolution. Evolution, according to me and common sense, says,
not a court case?
You mentioned a bunch of times the word believe. You believe in evolution. You believe you're related to a strawberry and a banana. Okay, there's no evidence for this. It's not science.
The religion?
I did. You heard me. I'll say it again. It's a religion, okay? You have to believe in these things. And you do, and that's fine. I don't care what your religion is. You can believe anything you want. Believe in the flying spaghetti monster. But it's a religious belief. And what you believe determines how you behave. Roosevelt believed Indians were inferior species, and they passed all kinds of laws to limit them to certain parts of the country. They moved them all out of the East Coast, moved them to the Trail of Tears, it's called. That's because of the leaders' belief in inferior species. Bible says we're all of one blood. You, black, white, red, green, purple, all people have a common ancestor. All of us have a common ancestor called Adam. Charles Darwin said...
Why is Negro on the screen?
Darwin said, a married man is a poor slave worse than a Negro. That's the hero of evolution. I got plenty of quotes on this. That's why you need to watch my video number 5.
See,
okay.
May I? I mean, if you had Negro on the screen, may I? Okay, yeah, you go.
You brought up 8 or 10 topics at a time. One of the rules I've asked Donny to enforce is one topic at a time, okay? You tell me where time came from. Let's go back to time, okay? Where was matter? Where were you 14 billion years ago? If the Big Bang was 13.77, where were the molecules that make up Kennedy 14 billion years ago?
Okay, I muted myself. Is that a good response time?
Yeah, and in the final minutes, now that we've gotten Kent's response, let's again really stay as focused as we can on, is all life related. I just want to say it's nice that we've got some philosophy discussion in there, but I do have several people in the chat, requesting that it stays on topic as much as possible. So let's really engage the question for tonight. Go ahead, Kennedy.
All right, give me 10 seconds here because I gotta formulate this very carefully. My brother had Negro on the screen, so give me a second here. All right,
is that a bad word? It's part of the French word for black. That's all.
I did not know that as someone who went to school for
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. So the reason that I find what you're presenting is life being connected to common ancestry is, here's what I'm going to say as we're getting to the final statements. Not believing in this and understanding what I've said, not addressing it, is inherently political, right? The idea that you and me are connected intrinsically, and there's no designer out there, and then we're also connected to the cats, the dogs, the monkeys, the gorillas. All of that has like a beauty in my eyes attached to it ultimately, right? We are special because we as a species connected to them and stardust from the universe get to have the responsibility to care about them and create a better world. That for me is better than a God designing it for us and then some book that tells us that this is how it is. So the common designer, the evidence is all the way out there, right? The evidence shows since you want to have Negro on the screen, right? Like before we had genetics, right? People were comparing me to monkeys before we even knew about it, right? Phrenology has fallen out of focus because when we found out that, oh crap, you can't use the fact that Black people look like monkeys as a way to actually denature the races before genetics, like, oh, and that helped abolitionists, right? And then what I love is that people say those people were Christians. So that argument for me is very interesting, but I understand where it comes from. And it's from my perspective, I understand why a lot of people of color don't believe in evolution, right? Because the story of where that comes from, the historical aspects of the transatlantic slave trade, right? You were whipped into believing this religion in the first place. And then the first intricacies of learning about evolution, Darwin, it's not like people like me were allowed to write those books and be involved in those rooms until 100 years later, 150 years later from when Darwin was doing it. I think if I would have my math right. So it's not, for me, it's a little funny that, right, phrenology fell apart and people use that as like, oh, look at these racist people, when the fact of the matter is when people like me got involved, and women especially got involved in the process of this information, all that stuff got denatured, right? And now we have different arguments that we're doing. Intelligent design isn't that old. It's not, you can trace the origins of the theory itself because it directly comes from, as a direct response to common ancestry, from what? Genetics. And why is phrenology not a thing anymore, right? So when you tell me that Hitler did this and Stalin did this and these people before then did this, I'm like, but could I have even said anything in those rooms? You're not saying anything to me with that information because I can't time travel past the 1970s anyway. I didn't have a place in those rooms, and neither did most women. So that's not an argument for me. And that's why what's happening now is more important, because those arguments fell apart because we are now a part of those rooms. And common ancestry is accepted not just here, but around the world. You can go to any university in any public place around the world and be taught this and still have religious stuff attached to it, right? You can still go to school and be taught this. I went through classes and was taught the sacraments and religious stuff, and it was fine. Like, I didn't believe in it.
Okay, Ken, I'm going to stop you there. So I'm assuming that we're never going to get to a free-flowing discussion, so that's fine. Let's allow
Ken's got to cut me off. You got to interrupt me, man.
Well, no, that's fine. See, a free-flowing discussion would be asking each other questions and kind of bouncing ideas back off each other. But that's that's completely fine. We'll just make sure, Kent, you get an equally timed response, and then we'll kind of go from there. Go ahead, Kent.
Okay, you said something about we're all connected to all the animals, etc. Are you a vegetarian?
Nope.
So you eat your cousins?
My cousins?
If you're related to the animals, do you eat
chickens?
They're not my cousins.
Well, the definition of cousins means a different thing. So do you think that the definition of cousins...
You're related to chickens, right? And you eat them?
Mm-hmm. But related doesn't mean cousins.
Okay, third, fourth, fifth cousin. Distant cousin.
Yeah, distant enough for me to not care. Yeah. Until we have like cell-based meat, and then it might be more important, because if you can like make the chicken in a polymer in a microwave like Spy Kids, it's going to be really hard to justify eating meat when you can just get it right there.
Oh, I had chicken for lunch today. It was good. Yeah.
Me too. I had some bourbon chicken earlier.
See,
but
ever since that
veganism and moving towards stuff. So
yeah, we Baptists eat a lot of chicken. Ever since that rooster betrayed Peter, we've been trying to kill all his grandkids. So,
but
okay, you say
they're alive.
You use the phrase people of color. I don't know, is the word Negro a curse word now? I mean, it comes from the French, which simply means black. I've never met a black man. And you've never met a white man. Now watch carefully, Kennedy. This is white. I'm not white, okay? This is black, and you are not black. You are darker brown than me, but I've never met a black person. I drove a bus for 15 years. I drove a bus for 16 years and brought thousands of what they call black kids to church. I fit in this. I love them. Thousands have come to church. I drove the bus, brought them, and they're great. There's not a prejudice bone in my body. But there's certainly nothing wrong with using the word Negro in my book. If there is, I'm sorry. Okay. A person of color. What color are you?
I don't know. What do I look? Do I look peanut butter or caramel?
Okay. Is that a color? Peanut butter?
No,
okay.
That was not a color. Okay. So let me ask you a question. So you could, yes, of course you could say Negro, but you know what you can't say. There's another N word that's close there, right? Like the reason that you can't say that, but when you were a kid, you could, is probably for some reasons. So like, yes, you can say Negro, but it's not like socially harmful enough. You're right. And I'm not going to like give you crap about it. I'm just going to laugh at you because it feels cringe. But like, yes, it's fine. I don't care enough to like make it more of an argument. But the point is that like us being...
Can you say honky? Can you call me a honky?
I don't want to. I don't know if you are. Are you?
I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means.
Oh, I guess you got to look it up. I don't know if you fit the definition. I've seen a lot of your debates. You don't seem, very talkish to me. But anyway, the reason that
we're way off track.
Yeah. Oh my. Okay, so this is very fun for me because I feel like and the reason why I feel like there's like a moment happening with us, because what I think is essentially different from what you prescribe is that you can't see what common ancestry would look like with Christianity. Like I want to, for everyone, like and when the questions come up, seriously, like what is the belief if you can have Christianity and your idea of yourself and a God or Jesus being an important figure sociologically, like other politicians and prophets of time or people who you don't believe were supernatural that still had important roles that you want society to be like Jesus for me is an important figure as a Westerner who still like you would want to look to in terms of morality and organizing society and looking past that. Like I have never believed and can still like gravitate to that. I love Star Wars and I love Dragon Ball Z. I love all these stories and arts and different things for that reason. And I think that is beautiful, and allowing oneself to be malleable with your identity and not having the supernatural stuff attached, but just saying, hey, we should be like Jesus is something I don't understand why you are like, it feels like you're escaping. Like, why can't that be a thing? Why can't you accept that evolution is true while still believing that Jesus is important, right? You're having a conversation with me. I know your parents and people around you wouldn't have been okay with that. The common answer, the idea that you are connected to me as a species itself was political, and now it's not, right? Now everyone says we're all connected under God, but that wasn't even true that long ago. For real. That's why I brought up what I brought up. So I really want to push back and understand, like, why is it that you can't accept the Christianity for you can't be malleable in understanding the evidence about common ancestry and genetics and geology, all of the stuff that people who are atheists and Christians and all sorts of different beliefs who are doing that same work, who still believe in God and the same things I do. Like, why can't that be something you let go? I've accepted what the idea of Christianity would be like, but why can't you accept what it would be not to have it?
Are you ready for an answer? You've talked and talked and talked. Can I talk now? Okay. Why can't I accept evolution as being true? Because I believe in science, and there's no science for it. Nobody ever sees any animal produce other than its kind. It's not part of science. You may believe it very strongly. Wonderful. It doesn't make it part of science. All we see is dogs produce dogs. No, there's no evidence for anything else. You make these family trees and draw lines on paper, and that's all it is imagination. They have the human connected to the bird. That's not science. That's a religion. They got the human and the bird and the reptile, dinosaurs and ladybugs, all connected to a common ancestor. I don't accept this because I believe in science. Science is what we can observe, study, test, demonstrate. Evolution is none of those. It's a religion. Okay?
Why can't you
and
call it pseudoscience?
You asked 3 questions.
Oh,
you said,
sorry,
why
sorry.
don't I accept? You said, why can't I accept the evidence? I do. You don't accept the evidence. The evidence is dogs produce dogs only. But in your mind, you're related to a dog. But we never see a dog produce a non-dog or come from a non-dog. There is no science to back up what you believe in, which is why you have a religious belief that you're related to a chicken, but you're far enough away you can eat them. Well, some people think the Americans are far enough away from some other, let's kill them. Hitler believed, hey, we're far enough away from the black Africans, let's kill them. Or the Jews, let's kill them. This is the motive. If it's okay to kill a chicken, why isn't it okay to kill a Jew? Go ahead, your turn.
Okay. I'm just gonna, Johnny, and you tell me please cut me off if this is I feel like you and I feel like what you push back at is that atheism requires a little bit of moral subjectivity, right? Because you keep bringing up these things about how detrimental it is to believe in common ancestry if it is true. Like that's what your arguments are not addressing what I'm saying. It doesn't feel like you're addressing anything directly that I'm saying. I want to be clear about that. But I understand the debates and how this works. But it feels like you're not addressing what I'm saying directly. But even so, like when it comes to that aspect of it, I just feel like the belief in morality and like the moral subjectivity that I have, I agree with you on that. In that, because what I said earlier is that human beings if human beings existed for 400,000 years in the same way you, me, and Donnie exist in this software right now, right? And then 98% of that history, we're not killing each other. We're not being violent against each other. Like there's no evidence of it at all for hundreds of thousands of years. If you accept that truth of it, the reason why I'm so fascinated by like you not even accepting that other people that are religious believe in that is because the story is so empowering and beautiful to me, right? The idea that we have the opportunity to subjectively like decide for ourselves what beautiful world we want together, especially now that the scarcity of the technology that we have, the fact that food is less scarce and electricity allows us, if we want to be politically connected and not have to fight each other over resources anymore. That for me is beautiful in the way that clearly hundreds of thousands of years ago, when we were able to, from the evidence of common ancestry, walk the earth with other species before it got maybe a little too cold and we just, made the other human beings out of existence. And here we are writing it down as we had to settle because food got scarce until now when it's not. That for me is a beautiful story. And we wouldn't have space art. Star Wars would not make sense to a Roman is what I'm curious about with you if those people existed. And it makes more sense to us. Why? Why, if we're not doing something that is very interesting, if something like that, the art we're making is somehow probably inherently different conceptually, I
was going to say, I appreciate the points. Since we've only got less than 2 minutes of the discussion portion, now what we'll do, since you started the discussion, Kennedy, Kent, let's give you the last word and the final say in terms of the discussion. Then we'll jump into some short closing statements. So go ahead, Kent, floor is yours.
Okay, long convoluted question you asked me. I don't know if I can follow all of it, but I don't accept the idea that the earth is billions of years old. I think it's scientifically impossible for many reasons without the Bible, okay? Certainly human history doesn't go back that far. So I think that there's no evidence of any animal producing anything other than their same kind. If you wish to believe otherwise, you can. And if this makes you have a beautiful imagination that, oh, wow, why can't we all get along because we're all related? Well, you can believe that. History shows it doesn't work. Darwin said we need to replace the savage races, talking about the Negroes. I'm sorry, I didn't know that's a bad word. From the war of nature and famine and death, higher animals come along. Negroes were for sale in 1859 in America when Darwin's book came out. They sold them as slaves. I think it's horrible. I live in the South. It's terrible. It's evil. Should have been stopped. Never should have happened, okay? But Henry Fairfield Osborn, American Museum of Natural History in New York, strong believer in evolution and promoter of that religion, said the standard of intelligence of the average adult Negro is similar to that of the 11-year-old youth of the species Homo sapien. Is that a racist statement from an evolutionist who runs a museum in New York? Yeah, it is. Stephen Jay Gould. Biological arguments for racism might have been common before 1850, but they increased by orders of magnitude following acceptance of evolutionary theory. Thomas Huxley, Darwin's bulldog. Darwin wrote his book and went and hid. Huxley promoted it. Huxley said, no rational man, cognizant of the facts, believes the average Negro is the equal, still less the superior, of the white man. Charles Kinsey, the black people of Australia, the same as the African Negro, cannot take in the gospel. They can't even be Christian, he said. Poor brutes in human shape, they must perish off the face of the earth. He thought they were just animals. He was an Anglican priest. I got tons of stuff on this topic on my video number 5. I'll send it to you if you'd like, okay? The Mormons believe Negroes are inferior. It's still going around. Brigham Young, shall I tell you the law of God regard to the African race? If the white man belongs to the chosen seed, mixes his blood with the seed of Cain, the penalty under the law of God is death on the spot. Under Mormonism, they taught if a white man marries a black girl, the guy should be killed. I think it's evil. Evolution's not a theory that brings wonderful peace and, oh, wow, let's all get along because we're related to chickens. I think it brings evil on the world. Pure evil. They were selling them slaves, packing them into ships. It was evil what happened. And I live in the South. And I'll debate anybody on that, okay? I'm not a racist bone in my body. But evolution is the foundation for racism. That's where it starts. You need to go back and study the history of Ernst Haeckel, who believed in evolution in 1904, wrote this book. The mental life of savages rises little above that of higher mammals, especially the apes, with which they are genetically connected. Their intelligence moves within the narrowest bounds. The lower races, such as the Vedas or Australian Negroes, are psychologically nearer to the mammals, apes or dogs, than to civilized Europeans. We must therefore assign a different value to their life. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What are you saying, Mr. Haeckel? The Negroes aren't worth as much as whites. It's racism because of evolution. This religion that you believe in was the source of the problem, was a lot of suffering for black people or dark brown people through the years. It's evil. I'm the best friend you guys have trying to get rid of this dumb evolution religion in our school system. So watch my video 5 where I cover it in great detail. It's simply a lie. There is no evidence for evolution. The reason I don't accept evolution, it's not science. I like science. There's nothing scientific about it.
Okay, Kent, thank you for the final word in terms of this discussion. Kennedy, Kent, that wraps up the discussion. Definitely went down a couple directions that were maybe not as anticipated in these types of science-related debates. But what we'll do, Kennedy, is we're going to give you a 3-minute closing statement. Kent gets a 3-minute closing statement, and then we're just going to get through a few of these audience questions that have come in. So with that, Kennedy, go ahead. I'll start your timer. 3 minutes for a concluding statement. The floor is yours. Just make sure to unmute yourself. You're good to go. Oh, I think you're still muted, Kennedy.
Okay. So, yeah, sorry to have to gain myself from. I have not heard Negro that many times since I was probably watching The Birth of a Nation. So that was fun for me. But for my 3 minutes, I want to make clear that, like, if the archaeological findings in anthropology that I've brought up, like, should not trivialize human atrocities and experiences of, like, oppressed communities. And in fact, I think the reality and the entanglement between structures and societies reveals that the origin of scarcity and warfare, militaries, labor, gender discriminations, and calling people Negroes have distinct geological markers. Settled life placed a heavy toll on women. Son stayed on the plot to tend to the land and livestock. In Genesis 3:19, God tells Adam, by the sweat of your face you shall eat bread. Some theologians suspect this verse alludes to humanity's shift to organized agriculture. The overwhelming evidence and sciences shows that it's not necessarily natural for us to be violent and brutish or sinners. We have the capacity to be so much more and have inclusive empathy And I think if there's no evidence in cave art, no evidence in the ground, then maybe the decency and connected to us can be exhibited through what we do socially and contextually. I find beauty in the reality, and I think that it's more empowering and stronger to find a responsibility to build the world that we want. And it frees us from the harmful assumptions built into perceiving ourselves as inherently negative or sinful. That's why I think beyond the clear scientific and biological evidence that shows common ancestry is true, that it's also beautiful to believe in if there's no designer out here telling us here's how we should live, because it's hard. The way that some of the stuff is coming out, like, it's so clear, especially for us as Westerners and Americans, how some of that is difficult. But if one doesn't have the ability to address that with their identity, it comes out cringe. It comes out cringe in my eyes. And one of the things that I want to leave with is, like, if you take seriously the idea that we're going to live in a pluralistic society where I'm going to be here and you're going to be here, and we don't want the transatlantic slave trade or gender discrimination to be as what it used to be, who will you be if your religion is wrong? If humans are among the last stars and evaporating black holes at the end of the universe, I still think there's work to be doing for all of us.
30 seconds.
Thank you. I refuse to accept the ideas that we're limited by some intelligent designer and that common ancestry puts us in some type of constraint and then justifies what you can't describe as, if we get into it, Christians and people who are religious pushing those ideas. What I said earlier is that it doesn't matter what you believe in or what God you have. What matters are the values that you have connected to people. And you can be atheist and you can be Christian. And we know people who've done with both. So if one's wrong, I've accepted it. What do you say?
Okay, Kennedy, that's 3 minutes. Thank you for the concluding statement. Now we're going to hand it over to Kent. Kent, whenever you're ready, you've got 3 minutes for a concluding statement as well. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. Again, 30 topics on the table and no time to answer all of them. Thank you. It's a little sad to me knowing that I paid for you to be brainwashed like you are. You were taught something that's just plain stupid. The topic of the debate is all life related to common ancestry. You didn't demonstrate that with any science. You said you believe in it, and you believe in these family trees that you're related to a chicken, but that's not science. We never see chickens produce non-chickens. We have 35 different kinds of chickens here in our farm. You can come see. They always make eggs that come out to be chickens. There are no exceptions, none. You can believe chickens are related to humans, and you do, and I paid for you to be taught that, and I'm sorry. Listen, you come down to Dinosaur Adventureland, I'll teach you the truth, okay, for free, okay? I'll teach you the truth. Now, so humans 300,000 years ago, no violence, that's imagination. First of all, the 300,000 years is imagination. That's not observable. As far as no violence, the first couple, the first kids, Cain killed his brother Abel. What do you mean no violence? It started off that way. Man's always been violent. There's been plenty of it, okay? They didn't live peacefully in the caves. You can believe that if you want. I don't know who taught you that, but that's not scientifically testable or provable either. You said you can have your own identity. I have mine. Dr. Kent, the science gent. I wish to be identified as Dr. Kent, the science gent. Thank you very much. I don't think, Kennedy, if a person can't see design in nature, I feel sorry for you. I can look at amazing design, the Fibonacci sequence in the swirl of a leaf or the swirl of a tail of a lizard or the way the scales. Do you really think all this happened by chance with no designer and it came from a dot smaller than a proton? In your religion, the Big Bang Theory, all the matter in the universe was squeezed into a dot smaller than a proton. There's no intelligent life down here, Scotty. Beam me up. Do you think there's no designer for that? You really think that can be explained by chance? I'm sorry. I can't believe somebody taught you that, and I really can't believe you got suckered into believing it. But you did. Okay, well, let's undo it. I think all you got to do is open your eyes and look around and say, wow, there had to be a designer. Look at that. That's amazing. Who does this? I believe it was the Christian God, but I'm not trying to get Christianity pushed into the school systems. I think the school systems should not teach religion at all. If we're going to have a public school, they shouldn't teach your religion over mine, but that's what's happening. So I think there's an obvious designer everywhere we look. I think it was God. And I think he wrote a book and told us how he did it. And my personal friend and savior. You really think nobody designed all this? Okay, well, I can't help you. I don't think. I'll try. But I believe God made the world. I'm going to stand by that. And I'm going to teach everybody I can that. And come on down and visit Dinosaur Adventureland, where God gets the glory for his creation instead of time and chance. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, Ken, thank you so much for the concluding statement. Gentlemen, that wraps up the opening statements, discussion, and concluding statements. So with that, we are going to enter the audience question and answer portion. And it looks like we've got some interesting questions here. Kennedy, since it is your first time here on the show, typically how we run these Q&As is whoever the question is for, we'll just make sure they get the last word. Okay, so here we go. First question that comes in is from Jeremy Nolan. Jeremy, thank you for the question. And the question's for you, Kent. So Jeremy is asking, do we have kinds within kinds? Like the lion kind and tiger kind all belong to the cat kind? Or is it like species within subspecies instead?
Well, I think the whole problem is the definition of words there. What do you mean by species? There are 27 different definitions of the word species. I think the Bible says they bring forth after their kind. And again, that may be a little nebulous, but it seems to indicate if they can bring forth, they are the same kind. A cow can bring forth with another cow. A cow cannot bring forth with a squirrel. Okay? So I think we would all agree that sometimes it's very simple to decide what's the same kind. But see, they want to draw these lines on paper and connect all the life forms. That's not science. How many kinds of 60 varieties of eagles, I believe. Okay. Might have had a common ancestor called an eagle. Does that justify drawing a line between an eagle and a clam and a frog? No. That's not science. So do we have kinds within kinds? I think man has decided to breed special dogs for special purposes and created a bunch of dogs that are useless and have to babysit them. Most of the dogs man has created with selective breeding, they're all still dog, and most would not survive in nature. Natural selection works great, but it selects, doesn't create anything. All it would do is select. All we've ever seen is dogs produce dogs. If Kennedy knows of an exception to that, I'd like to see it. But until we can see it happen, it's not science.
Thank you, Kent. Kennedy, go ahead with your response.
A response to this one? Yeah, I mean, it goes back to you can't observe it. You're right. And I think what's so essential about can we observe, blah, blah, blah. We have evidence that you can. And part of it is trust in the institutions that we've created, where there are people who don't believe and do believe working on it, or trust your Bible, right? And so if you do the former, right, we don't use kinds. We don't use these definitions. That's not a part of it. And what you call science, what I never seem to understand is what you say is not science, but you somehow, in those same institutions that say flat Earth isn't real, those are science. But then this area of science isn't. But they're not teaching what you teach in the public institution. I find very fascinating. They don't do kinds. Kinds is not a part of it. So I don't know how to answer that, because from what I understand, biology doesn't separate that. And you can have species that interbreed in ways that don't necessarily just capitulate to kind, which is why we use different words like clades or aspects of genetics, or, the actual, animal kingdom tree, where we have different names for these things. We categorize everything for that reason. And I don't understand why you just want to stick to what your Bible says you have to categorize by.
Okay, thank you, Kennedy. Kent, question was for you. Get the last word.
I'm fascinated. You say you trust your institutions. Should they have trusted the institutions 200 years ago that said blacks are inferior and should be slaves? Should you just trust the institution for that? I mean, come on now. You want to trust the institution? Come on. Surely you're smarter than that. It's a job of everybody to question and challenge the institution. Just because a bunch of folks believe something doesn't make it true. If the lemmings are running over the cliff and I'm a lemming, I'm going to say, stop. Why are we running over this cliff? I don't want to run over that cliff. Yeah, but everybody else is running over the cliff. Study lemmings. You're a lemming, okay? You're following the crowd. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you, Kent, for that final word. And it looks like the next question comes in from Creationist crybaby Kent, your number one fan. So
Amen.
he never misses a debate. Our number one fan, I should say. So creationist crybaby says, Kent, we have modern examples of eyes from very primitive to very complex. Why do you maintain there had to be half an eyeball for evolution to be true?
How many things have to be right on an eye to make it work? The answer would be millions. You have 137 million light-sensitive cells on 1 square inch of the retina, the back of your eye. 137 million, each connected to the brain. How many things can go wrong and make it stop working? Any one of thousands of things. So it's true, we have complex eyes. Darwin said, to suppose the eye could have been formed by chance, by natural selection, seems absurd. He later went on to say he believed it did, but he gave no scientific evidence for it. What we see is incredible complexity in eyes and say, wow, this is amazing. It works. Now, I see if the car has thousands of parts that have to work together to make it run down the road. Your eye has to have millions of parts to work together so you can see and distinguish colors and move them around and heal when they get hurt. Man, if you wish to believe it happened by chance, that's fine. Do you believe, crybaby, that every molecule that makes up your eyes was in a dot smaller than a proton? You do believe that if you believe the Big Bang. Not only all your eyeballs, your whole body. Your brain, I can understand that would fit easily, but I don't think your eyes could fit, okay? And you want the whole universe in that dot. You're certifiably insane, in my humble, totally unbiased opinion. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kent, for the response. And Kennedy, if there's anything you'd like to add to it, go ahead.
Sure. I mean, like, you talk about how much you pity me. Like, I pity you for your lack of creativity and imagination, you know? I don't study quantum physics, but I can definitely understand how a thing can be densely packed in a thing, and then, you know, the energy density of that. Like, unless black holes don't exist, I don't understand why we can't extrapolate that out into, you know, how we understand other things. That's how we, you know, discovered them in the first place. So when it comes to the half an eyeball thing and what we keep going back into what Darwin said, and so annoyingly what these more conservative white men before people like me had the ability to be in those rooms were saying, is like so annoying to me. Darwin was wrong about a lot of things, and we've advanced on evolution and theories a lot since then. Why are we not focusing on any of the research that's come out since 2000? I see the debates on chromosome 2, on very specific things, and we can do that. But the reason I don't even find that interesting is because it feels like you're having a debate on something that is not peer-reviewed, double-blinded research that people have already accepted that can be Christian, and you're not allowing your religion to be malleable to what the clear evidence is until somehow you have to accept it anyway, unless you know, have a structure like this where it can keep being monetized. But that's my response.
Kennedy, appreciate it. Kent, question was for you. You get the last response.
What a false accusation there, Kent. I don't do this for the money. Are you kidding? You have no clue. You don't have a clue in the world, okay? Your teachers got paid to teach you evolution. I had to pay them. You're the guy doing it for the money. Don't blame me. Okay, now, to the question. Kennedy, if you have no problem believing that everything fit into a dot smaller than a proton, and you believe this Big Bang theory, I will pay you $1,000 if you can get any scientist in the world to squeeze a gallon of water, 1 gallon, into a dot smaller than a proton. That's not the whole Pacific Ocean now, just 1 gallon. You get 1 gallon squeezed into a dot. I want to see it, not theoretical. Let's see it.
Can we have this? We all heard this? If I find a scientist,
I'm going to pay you $1,000 when you can physically squeeze 1 gallon of water into a dot smaller than a proton.
Now, do I have to do it with my hands, or can I use a machine?
Not theoretical. I want to watch it happen. Show it to me.
And it can happen with a machine.
It has to weigh as much as a gallon of water.
But it has to be smaller than a proton?
That's what the Big Bang Theory says. The whole universe was in a dot smaller than a proton. Yeah.
There weren't protons.
You can't squeeze a gallon of water into a pint, let alone into a dot. You believe in evolution. I'm sorry they taught you that. Hold it. Okay, Donnie, we're way off track of creationist crybaby's question. Yes, there are many things that can go wrong for an eyeball to not work. If you had 99%, you had a complex eyeball, creationist crybaby, 1% of that eyeball could go bad someplace and you would be blind. Ask any eye doctor. How many things have to be wrong to go blind? Oh, a tear in the optic nerve detaching from the retina, the optic nerve going into the brain, that detaching up there. They can go bad in the brain, in the optic nerve, in the retina, in the lens, in the pupil. There's 1,000 things can go wrong and make your eyeball stop working. Now, if you want to believe it happened by chance, and I know you do, you're welcome to believe that, but that's not science. The fact that we see a variety of eyeballs in nature does not prove any relation. It proves an amazing designer to me. Wow, God designed some to see underwater. He designed some to see half in the water and half out of the water. There's fish get right at the edge of the water and they can see above them and below them at the same time. That's pretty cool. That's a design. I don't know how you can't see it. Go ahead.
Okay. Appreciate the final word there, Kent. CC, thanks for the question. Now we'll get one in for you here, Kennedy. So this comes in from James Bray, and James is asking, what link made him believe anything can evolve into anything? I did ask for a clarification, and he said he's just curious what makes you think anything can turn itself into anything, as in, you know, is there a persuasive fossil missing link or something that you would look to? But anyways, Kennedy, go ahead.
I'll go ahead and answer that. So what I love about that question is it, especially for young earth creation, is it depends on where you're starting looking, right? Because we have clearly had a debate where we're talking about human beings connected to primates, but also human beings connected to all of life. So when it comes to like how one can turn into it, that's not what evolution says. Things don't turn into like it, that's not what it says, right? You have very tiny variations over time, and our brains separate that morphology of change into more higher levels of speciation. Like over time, like it used to be just kinds, but now we have all these sorts of different deviations because we understand things more. So things don't turn into themselves. We just see tiny, tiny variations and we classify those as different separations, right? Like and that can get tricky, right? Is there a difference between me and Kent because we have a different skin color? Some people said that we were a different species too. Are we? I agree with you. And those people were Christians, first of all. Let's get that straight up, right? Don't play with me. So like people used to believe in that, and it's not, people don't do it anymore. And it's widely accepted because we're trying to build something better. And I think that like when we understand other species, right? I think a lot about that with the animals that we think of what can be harmed and can't. Like think about the animal, you talked about me eating vegan, like, or eating chickens. Like if somebody harmed a cat or harmed a gorilla versus harming a horse, there are all sorts of different animals that your brain has a connection to emotionally that you're going to feel bad about if somebody does, and maybe someone else doesn't, right? That subjectivity is very fascinating to me if there is something objective that you're arguing about as being that special. And I find it fascinating because no one actually lives that way in reality. So things don't turn into anything. The argument is that we see variation over time and we classify that and continue to change that classification. And specifically, we do it with humans, like way more nuanced, right? Where's the first human? When is the first language? When, like, that definition is much more complex than like how connected we are to mushrooms versus plants. That's going to be a lot harder, more research, and like, which question are we actually more interested in? And we'll spend public resources and scientific labor on. You know, that's ultimately what some of these questions come down to, and you're asking where this goes to. And I think it's very important because we shouldn't spend time trying to just focus on like what a book says. We should continue doing what we're doing. And clearly the court cases show that we're going to do that anyway until we have another precedent.
Okay, Kennedy, thanks for the response. Kent, over to you. If there's anything you'd like to add, go ahead.
Well, the textbooks clearly do teach that everything came from a common ancestor that was a single-celled creature. This is the common teaching. They draw lines back to an amoeba or a protozoa or one of the 20,000 different single-celled creatures, okay? This isn't science. All the many forms of life on Earth today are descended from a common ancestor found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. Single cell, okay? No traces of those events remain. So they draw the lines connecting humans and all the animals back to a single-celled creature like an amoeba of some kind. This is not science. And you said they don't run into is tiny variations over time. This is a way for you to hide how dumb your religion is in verbose verbiage that, oh yeah, we don't. It happens so slowly we don't see it. My point is, this isn't science. We don't see any animal do this. Science, look up the word science. It comes from the Latin word "ser," which means to know. What do we know? We know starfish produce baby starfish. We know that. We do not know starfish should be connected to an amoeba. They drew a line on paper and they lied. We do not know that they have a common ancestor. This is propaganda, and you swallowed it. I feel sorry for you. And you said what we need is more research. Let me just tell the audience what that really means is send more money. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Need more research. We got to prove our religion. We believe it happened. We just need more research. We've got to send more money to our institutions so they can keep searching for a common ancestor. When it should be obvious by now, dogs produce dogs. Cows produce cows. There's no exceptions to that. They always have. They always will. All through recorded history, farmers have been raising cows, and they had baby cows. Go look at the cave art. They have cows on there. They have longer horns, slightly different. They're still cow. And they're recognizable. Wow, that's a cow. But you think a cow came from an amoeba. And they put these books, these charts on paper and say, look, boys and girls, the protozoa turned to a biology teacher. I don't understand how anybody with one brain cell functioning can think that is science. That's a religious belief. It's a fairy tale. Even if it's true, it hasn't been proven scientifically yet, and it shouldn't be proven, it shouldn't be taught at taxpayer expense until that day. You should remove evolution from the textbooks. There's nothing scientific about it.
Okay, thank you, Kent, for the response. Question was for you, though, Kennedy. You can have the quick final word. Go ahead.
Thank you. Dogs and cats and cows and Negroes. Oh my, So I really do get the idea that like we have a different sense of reality like here. But like what you keep going back to is that like we have this religion and this weird like belief system. And like I love when you keep going to like we can't teach it in public schools. Because that for me, I didn't even go to public schools to learn this. Like I went to Jesuit schools and they still taught this, right? Because with Vatican II and all the stuff after it, you can be Catholic and still teach this in some places, right? It's not inherent. The Jesuits are very good about that because their perspective is they want to be all around the world and malleable and allow people from all sorts of different, institutions to be a part of their ideology somehow. And they do a good job of it because I think their schools are still pretty good. I'm very grateful that I still went to them. So I don't understand where this comes from. And it feels like a lack of maybe your experience and the fact that these things exist, because you're not addressing the fact that I'm saying here are all these experiences where that literally isn't true. And people live with an entirely different experience of what you're saying, right? And if either these people exist or I'm just making them up. Either people exist believing in what I'm saying and are working on it and doing it. And so if it's propaganda, who is doing the religion part of it? And are people believing in multiple religions at once? All for like, this is hundreds of millions of people that are propagandized in your view all around the world. And like every university, public and private, because what you're describing from my perspective is the fact that this ideology has lost, like many others. It's lost public space, even for people that believe in religion. And because people that don't believe aren't going to like demonize you for still believing in it, you're around for it. And like, we're trying to push you to like, use your power or your influence to maybe find a different route for it.
Okay. Thank you, Kennedy. So for these next couple questions, as we wind it down here, let's do speed rounds just to be able to get through these. And all right. Appreciate it. This one comes in from Born Again RN. He says to slam that like button. So appreciate it, Born Again. So his question for you, Kennedy, if all life came from a common ancestor, wouldn't creatures with opposite sex organs have to evolve simultaneously in order to reproduce sexually?
No. We have species now that produce both sexually and asexually and both at the same time. So, you can have all sorts of things across. What we keep finding through more and more research is that tons of things exist on a continuum or in a spectrum. That's what I love about the challenging research that we continue to find, is that all of the stuff that we define and categorize exists upon a spectrum, right? There just were stars and planets. Right now, there are dwarf stars, dwarf planets, brown stars. Like there's so much in between like just a star and a planet, like all these different categorizations. right? We make up categories for everything. What are there, like 10 weight classes for the sport of wrestling? We make up categories to help our brains like conceptualize what we want, and they're free to change if we socially accept them to be. And that's why what we categorize also isn't, you know, also absolute in every other place doing this stuff. And that's why I'm so confused by the idea that you can believe in an idea of God and can call yourself a Christian. And so I don't understand why you have more of a contention with me versus all these other people that believe and still believe in what I believe. You have not talked about them at all. And I don't see a lot of arguments about like why that doesn't make sense. Like, so does that answer your question?
That's good. Thank you, Kennedy. Kent, over to you if there's anything you'd like to add.
Well, again, 4 or 5 topics on the table. As far as if you got taught by the Jesuits and Catholics, I would consider that a far cry from Christianity. Okay, quite the opposite. Why I'm not a Catholic, you want to get our book, I'll give you one if you'd like. I think there's about as far off from the Bible as you can get. Not quite as far as atheists, but pretty close, okay? So I would strongly disagree. I'll debate all of them at the same time. Get them on the program, okay? Now, as far as the question, if all life came from a common ancestry, wouldn't creatures of opposite sex organs have to evolve simultaneously? I don't think there's any other way around that. Yes, they'd have to, unless they're in San Francisco. So I think it would have to be, yes, you'd have to have the male and female, and they're very, very complex. There is no possible way to explain sexual reproduction. I'm doing a whole series every Friday night called Making Babies. Go back and watch any of my programs. None of the atheists that hate me, even creationist crybaby, has not even attempted to answer any of the questions I've asked. How did this evolve for these creatures to make babies? How do you get this step by step? By blind chance. A watch has to have all kinds of parts together at the right time in order to work. Any one can be wrong or missing and it stops working. Any one part of your car could stop it from working, like not having the key, okay, not having the battery hooked up. There's a million things you can do where it can't work. So with life, and especially reproducing, why would any animal want to reproduce? All it does is make more babies, which is more strain on the food supply. Why did all of the animals evolve the ability to reproduce, but none of them evolved the ability to live forever? Why would any lion want to make more babies and have to live off his same territory? Why would any animal want to make more babies to have to increase competition for food? It doesn't make sense. I think it was designed. I think it was a wonderful design, by the way, but I think it was designed. I think God made it. There's no other explanation for it. If you wish to believe it happens slowly by millions of chance mutations, that's a religion. Stop calling it science. Until you're Jesuit priests, I'll debate all them anytime. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kent. Kennedy, question was for you. Feel free to have a quick final word and go ahead now.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess we just keep like fiddling back between time and like you're not saying anything about what I'm talking about, but that's fine. I love this. This is really, really enlightening, and I'm really looking forward to more of this. Honestly, I'm really enjoying myself. But like, I mean, it takes 100 years to just count to 1 billion. You know, like the amount of time we're talking about. If of course it's such a a difference in our ontological like perspective. Because if my time's real, it is fine, right? Like it takes a long time, and so like you're right. If I have the time that the science, I'm good. You're right. You're like so right, and that's the whole point of this. And why I find it so fascinating, what I keep going into, is that like, but you can be Christian without that definition of time. And if those Christians are just crazy, the ones who believe in it, and still like, have a definition that's similar to me, I find that so fascinating and interesting that you are different than them. If that answers it just takes variation over time, right? If with my definition of time, it does make sense for little bits of variation for eventually, especially if life is just eating each other, right? The first single cell organisms were eating each other. So to get better at not being eaten, you get better at not being eaten. And here we have us not wanting to be eaten and have the scarcity to not be eaten.
Okay.
Life.
Thank you, Kennedy. As we now hit the 2-hour mark, we've got one final question. We're going to wrap it up. So Kent and Kennedy, thank you for the time you've both given to us tonight. And this is the final question. Looks like it is a question for both. And Coda P is asking, what is the definition of religion? Kennedy, if you wanted to start, feel free to do so. It's up to you.
Okay. So for me, my definition of religion is still malleable, right? Like I've grown up thinking that religion meant that you had to believe in an anthropomorphic God, and now I don't. I now know other religions that don't, right? So the definition of religion for me is whatever your community, like, I think you do have to have some sort of like God attached to it, but that God doesn't have to be a person, but you're organizing society and hopefully like what you view in yourself and in others through this common story. And that is ultimately what I think is a definition of religion that can get super tricky, right? The sociology of religion is itself a highly debated topic. Are nations religious? They don't exist either. Is believing in what Kent said about race and how people used to say it religious? Not that I'm not saying you still do, but like what people used to believe, like, is that religious? You can make contestments for all of these things, and what we end up accepting is, I guess, religion. So I think my definition of a religion is very malleable, but I think what I ultimately contend with is that I don't agree with like religion in terms of the anthropomorphic God. So like a religion that says that you have an entity that is designed a moral system and a ontological idea of like who we all are, and this is how all of reality is. And that's what I contend with and disagree with. But religion doesn't have to have that. So I don't, as an atheist, like fully contend with the problem with religion because it doesn't necessarily have to affect me. And some people could call me religious from their own perspective of it being malleable.
Okay, Kennedy, thanks for the response. And it is a question for both. So Kent, go ahead. Floor is yours.
It's been many years since I looked it up, but if I recall, the dictionary definition is religion is belief in a power or powers that created and controlled the universe. That's what Kennedy has. He has a belief in a power of time and chance that created everything. And I think that's a religious belief. It's not observable. It's not science. The definition of science is pretty obvious. It comes from the Latin word "seer," knowledge. What do we know? Well, we know cows make cows. That we know. We do not know cows and bananas have a common ancestor. And I think the burden of proof was on him tonight to prove. Let's see, where's the original? There we go, right here. Okay. Is all life related to common ancestry? He was supposed to say, prove that it was. He stated that he believes that it was. He gave no evidence that he's related to a chicken other than he believes it. Nobody's ever seen a chicken produce a non-chicken, and he eats his own, 50th cousins. I do too, and I recommend it. Okay, so if it's cooked right, Kentucky Fried, I think, still makes the best. But so I think what we've seen tonight is an example that he has not seen. Kennedy does not understand that he has a religion. That's all he has. Evolution is nothing, but he believes it's science. I don't think there's any convincing him of that. But I think most of the audience saw. He has a religious belief that he's related to a chicken, not a scientific, verifiable, testable, demonstrable. That's what science is. There's no science for it. It's a religious belief. And that's all you got, Kennedy. I feel sorry for you. Come to Dinosaur Adventureland. We'll straighten you out.
Okay, Kent and Kennedy, that wraps up the debate. Definitely an interesting conversation. So I do appreciate both of you engaging in this debate. As Kent said, I think at the beginning, we've now done about 50 plus of these in 2022. And for the audience sake, first thing in 2023, here's a thumbnail I've got for it. It'll be a show with me and Kent, the Evolution Debate Challenge Year in Review. So we're just kind of discuss the last year worth of debates, open up the mic, and allow people to join. So with that, gentlemen, let's have some quick final words, final thoughts, if you had them. Kennedy, let's start with you. Again, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking the challenge. And some quick final words, final thoughts.
Yeah, just I appreciate the time. This was, I feel like I'm intelligently designed for this. This feels like a great opportunity for me to keep going forward. And I appreciate what you've done, and I'm hoping that over time, like my discussion becomes more salient, so that you can feel like it feels like you're actually responding to some of the things. But I really appreciate the time that you've given me, and I'm hoping there's some things that I've said that are what you've never heard before, perspectives that are new. And so I just appreciate both of y'all times, and I hope we can do this again for real to everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kennedy. My pleasure. And Kent, over to you. Thanks again for doing this. Final words, final thoughts.
And thank you, Kennedy, for doing this. I appreciate it. We'll do it again anytime, publicly or privately. If you want to come talk, come down, visit Dinosaur Adventureland, Lenox, Alabama. It's free. We'll put you up, teach you, give you the tours of our place. I love science.
If I may,
science,
I would love
science
to.
Is polluted. Science is polluted with a dumb religion of evolution. I'm trying to fix it. I'm the hero of the plot here. All right. Check out drdino.com. You can call me on my phone, 855-BIG-DINO, extension 3. I take calls all day long and half the night. Then I shut it off when it's time to go to bed. So I'm so curious to ask a question, but I probably shouldn't. Go ahead. Do you take any questions, Kennedy?
Are we still live?
Is that a dress you're wearing?
Oh, no, it's a shirt.
Okay. I just wondered. I like it. It looks pretty. But
I do wear dresses sometimes.
My wife has one similar. I thought, oh, no, here we go. All right. Thank you so much. You're welcome here anytime. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Okay, Kennedy, Kent, thanks so much. God bless you. All right, all. I am back just for a couple minutes here just to go over some announcements and reminders for everybody. Appreciate that. Doki doki. If you want to support or continue supporting the ministry as we go into 2023, we've got a lot of big plans and goals. Then please feel free to support us at these relevant links. And definitely an interesting debate, I'll say, as I usually like to. There's another one in the books, another one specifically in the Evolution Debate Challenge series books. And as I kind of went over at the end there, we do have coming up January 4th, it looks like. So in January, the first week, it'll be our year anniversary, I guess you could say, since basically we started this challenge. We've done over 50 debates on it. It's been lively. It's been prolific. It's been a ton of fun. We've had a lot of interesting debates in this series, a lot of debates to remember, that's for sure. So this will be a year in review show. It'll be myself. There might be another couple of us from the SFT Ministries here joining as well. Anybody's welcome. We'll have Kent here, and we'll basically just discuss the year worth of debate, some of the highlights, some of the arguments that were advanced, and then I'll open up the chat. So if you're of the evolution persuasion and you wanted to, present your evidence and you wanted to do it live here on this channel, but you haven't necessarily been comfortable enough to do, a formal debate, well, this is your opportunity. I'll make sure that the link is dropped for everybody. And if you want to join and just kind of have a back and forth discussion, talk about this, topic with Kent, Born Again RN. Good question, brother. So, we've been hosting evolution debates for the last 4 years. So overall, we've hosted now 260 debates on all sorts of topics. The challenge itself, we've been calling it the Evolution Debate Challenge series, kind of for fun, something we came up with at the end of 2021 there. We've been doing that series itself for a year, but evolution debates in general, yeah, we've been doing them for the last 4 years. So you can find easily over probably 150 on that topic in this, on this channel. So, again, I want to remind people too that tomorrow we're going to be having, this is basically the final show, and then we're actually going to have a few days off here with nothing scheduled, although I may do my second episode in the Case for Separate Ancestry. So if you haven't seen episode 1, please do check it out, the Case for Separate Ancestry. I uploaded that last week. And so with the 3 or 4 days that we don't have anything scheduled intentionally, I may put out episode 2. So anyways, tomorrow, 5 o'clock EST, we've got a Christmas special with the Creation Research team. And typically here on Stand for Truth, we really focus on the science, but this show is basically just going to focus on the Christmas story. So the Creator came for Christmas, Jesus in Genesis to Jesus in John. It will be live, so bring your questions And, that should be fun. We've also got Kennedy and Evan. So they're friends here, and Evan's going to be joining me. I believe it's on the 27th, if I'm not mistaken. I've got a ton of events set. So just check the event section on the channel. Make sure you're subscribed. If you're not yet subscribed, share around this content. Critical thinking is important. That's why we want to host these kinds of discussions, guys. Even if they're somewhat controversial at times, they're needed. So Evan and Kent, this one specifically is going to be titled, "Is There Enough Evidence to Invalidate Evolution?" Something like that. Is something close to that. So that should be an interesting one for sure. And as people have probably seen, last night I added a few more debates for January that should be interesting. This one, Paul Price, Snake was right. Is there good evidence for God? Grayson and Jamie. This is going to be a wild one for sure. Big Bang to Evolution. I've got Paul Price joining me again in January to discuss Behemoth. Dr. Dan Biddle is going to be joining me in January to discuss Dinosaurs, Man, Creation, and the Flood. Dr. Jerry Bergman is going to be joining me in January as well. So we're kicking off the year with a lot of events. We're going to make it a good way to start the year. So the Great Rapture debate, this is first. This is going to be taking place first week of January as well. So guys, that's just a fraction of the overall material that we do have for you in terms of January. We will be ending the year with a couple bangs as well, because we do have, as I've shown, a couple more debates in the Evolution debate series. Evan and Kent, and then also Grayson and Kent. Round 2 is coming up. So with that, guys, I'm going to wrap this up here. We'll see you tomorrow at 5. And again, thanks for tuning in. Thank you for all the live questions, the support, the super chats, and the questions. So with that, God bless, guys. Standing for Truth is out.